for some fucking reason, everybody seems to be obsessed with the quote unquote realistic movies in independent movies. I fucking just don't get that. There's no such thing as realistic cinema.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But there is a thing called cinematic reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Because cinema is a lie. Whenever I'm shooting, I normally shoot each day is like, if I die the next day, I shouldn't be fucking regretting what I did yesterday. I actually write basically because I think Facebook serves to me as a sort of a documentation for my own thoughts. That's quite a long topic, but I'll try to. Yeah, I'll get misinterpreted. So fuck it. Like I'll say it anyway.
Hi, welcome to Where We Talk About Films, a podcast where we talk about films. My name is Vidar Joshi. I'm your host, and today's conversation is with Mr. Aadish Keluskar. The conversation goes from microbudget filmmaking to realistic cinema, independent cinema, working with actors, his philosophical views, his political views, and so much more. And this episode is literally as bold as it can get. So I hope you guys have fun. Oh, also sorry for the. So if you cannot bear these stories, then the society is unbearable. And who am I to remove the clothes of the society, which itself is naked? Now, these lines by Sadasas and Manto define the cinema of our today's guest, for me at least. His films are so real and reflective that they can scare you sometimes. And speaking of most complex issues and emotions through his characters, most complex philosophies through his characters, he's one of the most fearless filmmakers we have in India currently. He's a writer, director of films like Kaul, A Calling, Jaoon, Kahan Bata Dil, short films like Zero by Zero, I Love You Too, An Encounter, and so many more. Please welcome Mr. Aadish Keluskar. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so
Thank you,
much for
man.
taking. So, hi. What are you doing during this whole unique situation we are in currently?
Nothing. So since our prime minister declared the lockdown,
Mm-hmm.
um, so the producer Vinay Mishra, with
Yeah.
whom I had worked in, he produced Jao Ka Bata, the last movie.
Mm-hmm.
So he called up and after 1 or 2 days, and he asked me, so you have read about this thing, right? The Corona
Yeah.
situation. I'm like, yeah, like about this pandemic, right? I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, I know it's going to last for like 12 to 18 months
Uh-huh.
because a lot of people at that time didn't know, but you know, I tried to figure out about the pandemic. I tried to figure out the Spanish flu that
Mm-hmm.
happened
Mm-hmm.
and partial pandemics and all that
Yeah.
that happened after that in 50s and 60s, and the last one was probably SARS.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so yeah, it was pretty much clear to me and even to Vinay Mishra that this is going to last for 12 to 18 months, if not more.
Okay.
All right, which basically means that of course there will be लॉकडाउन लगाएंगे
Yeah.
फिर बाद में निकालेंगे फिर से लगाएंगे I mean everybody will be clueless but
Mm-hmm.
the virus itself kind of slows I mean it comes in three waves
Mm-hmm.
and I mean all that kind of timeline I mean you can read about the pandemic
Yeah.
so basically it was pretty clear that to us that okay fine now we have to think about how to make movies so he was
Mm-hmm.
like we need to make a movie not necessarily in the lockdown, but in this, like, it's going to be there,
Mm-hmm.
this whole thing. So I'm like, yeah. And I'd been thinking about it. So then I asked him what basically the production process, like,
Mm-hmm.
what are the things that we can do, we cannot do, what
Yeah.
kind of safety measures we cannot take. Uh, and then, speaking to him and then speaking to Abhishek Gautam, who is
Yeah.
like the creative head of Amara movie, um, we kind of figured out the things that we cannot do
Mm-hmm.
no matter what movie we are trying to make.
Mm-hmm.
So nothing. So after that, I just wrote it down on a Microsoft Word document. This is the first time I've written down the production restraints before even thinking of an idea.
Okay.
And so I wrote that down, and then nothing. I just kind of had a brainstorming session with my other
Mm-hmm.
imaginary personalities and came up with an idea, logline basically,
Uh-huh.
situation. And yeah, after that, just the normal screenwriting process.
Mm-hmm.
Knew about the kind of budget, knew about the kind of things that uh, we we do not want to take. I mean, the kind of risk we do not want to take in terms of health
Yeah.
for the crew or the cast.
Yeah.
Uh, and yeah, so wrote it, sent it to him. He liked it, and then we started the pre and all that. So I've been
Okay.
honestly busy from like I haven't had like now just because the shoot got over like a week back. So since then I've been like now waiting for the first cut and stuff like
Acha.
that and reading and
Okay.
stuff like
So it's a full-length feature film, right? And you
that.
completely made the whole film during the lockdown. Oh, that's quite productive.
Yes. Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Okay, so my first question is that I watched the films and like strongly feel that there is always this one or multiple complex things, emotions, issues, philosophies you touch upon. Like for example, in Kaul or with Jaoon Ka Bataya Dil, it was more political and society issues and everything. How do you craft a narrative around these things which are not so easy to say it out loud? Like they're complex, they're a lot of layers, and you go through all the layers with your writing. So what is that process like to craft a narrative around this, the the most complex thoughts you have?
By narrative, do you mean like screen, like the flow of events, or like?
This story, the characters, like the whole your writing process basically.
Okay, so I till now have figured out two writing processes that work for me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, one is something where I kind of get an attack. All right,
Okay.
the idea, not just the idea. I mean, sometimes it just like starts flowing, and I have to like find something to write. And if a laptop is available, I'll write on that. If a paper is available, like all I wrote like while I was in FTI at that time, and I wrote it on laptop. But Jaoon Ka Badal I wrote like when me and my parents were going for our cousin's wedding in Konkan. So uh, I just got in the train a thing, and I just got my father had some diary, and I just started writing, and then I kept writing. I didn't give a fuck about his wedding, and I just kept writing throughout. So yeah, so attacks come sometimes, which is much easier, but
Okay.
you cannot depend on attacks all the time to
Mm-hmm.
happen to you. So the other way which also works for me is that I normally try to work on the logline. Like
Okay.
logline comes as a flash,
Huh.
but after that I write so what you call the certain I just call it eventology.
Mm-hmm.
Like what's next? Okay, fine, this happened. Now what next? That
Mm-hmm.
kind of just
Yeah.
imagination kind
Yeah.
of stuff. And yeah, so mostly I believe in definitely. I mean, in either of the approaches, I believe in writing the first draft without thinking of anything.
Okay.
Just don't think. Just
Mm-hmm.
go ahead. If
Mm-hmm.
something is not being solved, leave that. Go to the next scene.
Okay.
Okay, if that is clear.
Huh,
All
huh,
right,
huh.
we'll come back to this one later. But you
Mm-hmm.
have to finish.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually in the second draft where a lot of thinking happens for both approaches. I mean, even if I've written it in
Okay.
attack or even if I've written,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, in the second draft actually a lot of things happen in terms of okay, fine, where have I repeated myself, where do I need to repeat myself,
Mm-hmm.
uh, uh, is the character layer coming out fine or it's ambiguous? Does it need to be ambiguous? Then it should be ambiguous. If it's not, then it's unnecessary, it needs clarity.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what happens. And then uh, I mean, till now, of course, like both of my like Kaul and Jaoon Ka Batadil didn't have at such a very I didn't follow really this rudimentary structure of act structure.
Huh,
The
huh, huh.
act structure I didn't follow. But I've written screenplays in which I have tried to follow the act structure and the
Okay.
story beats as
Mm-hmm.
the it has been going on for
Mm-hmm.
ages. So so in the second draft, if I look at that thing, if I feel like
Mm-hmm.
if it's following the story beats, is it having that inciting incident, is it having the hero's journey, or
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever are the equivalents of things. So yeah, the third one is just basically for the language in
Okay.
terms of again the
Mm-hmm.
clarity of thought and grammatical mistakes and stuff like that.
Okay.
So
And huh.
that's what I do at writing stage.
Mm-hmm. and almost all the stories have a very eerie, explicit premise, which are very unique and at the same time, so to say, dark. What do you think drives you to these kind of narratives, like by default, or are you planning to change that or something like that? What drives you to these narratives?
I don't know. I mean, that's like asking, why do you like ice cream and not, pudding or something? Because, I mean, if I have to answer it honestly, I can talk about like, oh, because, of my life evolution and whatnot. But honestly, human beings, I mean, if anyone is into neuroscience or ecology, will understand that you really cannot give an answer to things. You don't decide basically what you like and what you dislike
Okay.
most of the times.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You can evaluate why you like something and why you don't like something, but the initial drive is almost not made by. It's not intentional.
Okay.
Like 80 to 100 billion neurons up here. Okay, average human brain 80 to 100 billion neurons, and then when they send signals are called synapses, and there are trillions of synapses. Like right now when we are speaking, there are trillions of synapses happening right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
amount of faculty we're using and all that. Now, if you so that's why I find like very tough to answer this question. What drives me towards this and that? Because I don't think I'll be truthful. I don't think
Okay.
I'll be accurate.
Okay. So
I'll be
okay.
missing a lot.
Okay. But okay, not this then. Another thing which I felt in the films you've made, there is a sense of anger, which I felt that. Do you think that is there? Like, where is that anger coming from?
Oh,
And is films is a way to let that anger out or something?
yeah. Yeah, I would rather use the word angst than anger. Okay, which is because anger could be towards a particular situation.
Yeah.
It's more like that kind of thing. But angst is something which is related to existence. That there is a certain kind of disturbance that you're feeling with yourself and the people around you or the situation around you. Uh, and this is not about morality. This is just a
Yeah.
imbalance. All right. Uh, and some people are able to digest it and kind of go on. Of course, not that they're happy. Some people are not or try to digest, but if they have a creative outlet, it see. I mean, movies or filmmaking, of course, has been romanticized by filmmakers, as any other art will be romanticized by the artist of that
Yeah.
particular art. But it's basically just a medium. Like if I was again if I was somehow introduced to or not introduced to, like, depending on the environmental factors, if I was into music, I probably would have done with this kind of whatever imbalance that I have. I would have probably created that sort of music. If
Okay.
like I would have played violin, I would have played tabla. I don't know, or painting I would have done. I don't
Yeah.
know, or I could have been a mass murderer also. I don't know if I had access to guns, or it could have. But art is normally very constructive, I think, for psychology, and because in art you can do the things that you generally, I mean, you can do in real life, but the consequences could be such that you won't be able to do it again and again. All right, but in art you can have that sort of a catharsis, if you want to call it.
Okay.
And the reason why people also are interested in looking at art from their whatever routine lives is because the kind of suppression that they also feel in the lifestyle, whether you are in urban society or in a rural society, it doesn't matter. It sort of just kind of puts you in touch with your primal instincts.
Yeah.
If it's art, if it's done not as a fucking project. I mean, the problem with our movies is that they're projects, right? Sometimes I don't just, yeah, you know. So, so yeah, but if you're watching a film or a movie which is not made as a project, as some Excel sheet thing, then I think you do respond. Of course, it depends on craft and how also. It's not just enough to express yourself. But yeah, so yeah, the answer to your where does the The angst I definitely do recognize. The reason why it is coming is just because there is a certain kind of syncing issue I have of my self
Uh,
with the outer self which is out there.
okay. And
Yeah,
what you mentioned right now, like if it's done as a project, then it doesn't happen. And if it's done
yeah.
as a way of expression, then it does. What do you mean
Mm.
by that? Like, what's the difference according to you?
You mean in terms of the effect or the mechanism?
The mechanism.
The the mechanism. So a
Hmm.
project is a very simple thing. Is basically, because we're talking about movies.
Hmm.
Uh, the the producers, or they could be individual producers, or they could
Hmm.
be creative producers in platforms or in production houses.
Yeah.
Whatnot. Um, so this applies to film, television, and also to web series. So there are two factors here. One is that, I mean, of course, in terms of the individual producers, they definitely don't want to suffer financial losses.
Yeah.
All right. Um, and even the big production houses,
Hmm.
they do not want to suffer financial losses.
Yeah.
And if it's a kind of a non-personal entity, like somebody working in a studio,
Hmm.
okay, the people who work over there do not have any personal connection with their company. Like if
Hmm.
somebody is working for Disney,
Hmm.
all right, you cannot expect, even Disney knows it, they cannot also expect a kind of a loyalty or kind of personal attachment of even
Hmm.
their CEO with the company, because
Yeah.
it's more like an entity, it's more like an abstract entity. If you think about it, it's not
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
personal,
Yeah.
right? So their main thing, like for example, if it's about a producer's individual money, then it's clear cut about कि loss नहीं होना चाहिए,
Huh.
profit नहीं होना है तो भी चलेगा, but loss नहीं होना
Huh.
चाहिए.
Huh. Huh.
Okay. And with the people who are there in the studio who pass projects, it's like कि, I think what they think, कि if this thing fails,
Hmm.
we should be having enough reasons to
Hmm.
justify later to our superiors कि it was absolutely fine to pass this thing
Hmm.
in the first place.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay, this is not about why it's not a hit. This is about why it's not watched by so many people. Blah 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 blah. Whatever, whatever.
Okay.
Okay. And once you look at things from that perspective,
Hmm.
then whether it's whether it's Kapola or Kantisha really doesn't matter.
Hmm.
Okay, what matters is uh, how much is the cost, how much we think we can make, or if we pass this, if it fails, what we
Yeah.
still will be able to retain our jobs.
Uh-huh.
That's the primary
Hmm.
motive there.
Hmm.
Um, and so once you start looking at anything from,
Hmm.
or if it's not like they're going to be like you know very very, I mean, some people are very conscious while discussing
Yeah.
stories and scripts about that part. Some people are not really conscious about it, but they're like, yeah, it's not working,
Hmm.
or yeah, this is working,
Hmm.
but it is coming from that sort of a, most
Yeah.
of the times, I mean, of course there are rare exceptions, as
Hmm.
otherwise we wouldn't have got good films only in the
Yeah.
first
Yeah.
place. But mostly this is what it is, and that's how the
Uh-huh.
projects get.
Hmm.
Okay,
Okay.
so everybody is kind of clear about this thing, and the approach changes then
Hmm.
about how you make it, about how a director is going to do casting, how the
Hmm.
actors are going to respond to the script, what
Yeah.
happens on the shoot, what is a DOP gonna do, what is an editor gonna do,
Hmm.
because hey, it's a project,
Hmm.
it's impersonal. It's not something
Yeah.
that I'll fucking die if I don't do this good
Hmm.
on this day. It's
Hmm.
not that kind of thing.
Hmm.
Okay, so these are the projects, and I mean, this is just for like name saying. Okay, this has
Yeah.
nothing to do with uh uh like I like, yeah, this has nothing to do with like what project is actually, because making a dam is also a project,
Yeah.
right, on a river. So I'm just saying because
Hmm.
I don't know, nobody has figured out the terminology for it. So these are the projects, and movies are made like without movies or films. That of course the money is a consideration
Yeah.
there. There also the production mechanism has to be taken into account, and all that, and where it will be sold or likely to
Hmm.
be sold, blah blah blah. But the risk factor is more, and there is some sort of an emotional connection
Mhm.
between the producer and the rest of the crew, everybody. You know what, like we need to like really do this today, right? Or whether it's the pre-production phase or the post-production phase or the
Mhm.
production phase. So that does
Okay. Mm.
impact the spirit of a film, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
yeah, yeah. Okay. And you mentioned financing. So now the kind of
Yeah.
stories you want to tell, the kind of cinema you're making currently, how
Mm.
difficult does it get to get financiers or producers on board to agree
Mm.
with the kind of voice you have in your films?
It's extremely difficult.
Hmm.
It's like hell difficult.
Hmm.
uh, because but still I mean it's quite interesting to me itself that uh, even I mean my movies are not even costly. I mean I wouldn't even call them low budget movies. Okay,
Uh-huh.
technically I'll call them micro budget movies.
Okay.
All right.
Hmm.
So they're not zero budgets.
Hmm.
They're micro budgets.
Hmm.
And even in that, I find it very hard to find producers.
Yeah.
I mean, thankfully, I've been lucky with Vinay Mishra that the last one and this one is doing. And hopefully, we will do more probably.
Hmm.
Let's see. That depends. But when Vidar, when the fear is there,
Hmm.
uh, in the other party,
Huh.
producers, financiers, creative
Huh.
heads,
Huh. Huh.
whatever, there's kind of a awkwardness, and I understand that there is no moral superior take I'm taking over here. Okay, I
Yeah.
would have probably done this if I was in their position.
Yeah.
All right. So this is not to say anything about that,
Hmm.
but just generally from an objective perspective, it's quite rare to find fearless people in any field,
Hmm. Yeah. True.
especially if there is money involved.
Hmm.
I mean, if they are the ones who are supposed to be giving money, or they have the responsibility to give money of someone else's.
Yeah.
Okay. So that is one reason. Second reason is this. That's quite a long topic, but I'll try to. Yeah, I'll get misinterpreted. So fuck it. Like I'll say it anyway. Uh, yeah. Because it requires a lot of context. Okay, but
Huh.
I'll just try to say this. So I feel that okay, fine. Mainstream movies, we know, the Karan Johars and Aditya Chopras
Yeah.
and what they do, and whatever the good, whatever not the good things, but whatever relative achievements that they get
Hmm.
in some of their movies and some of their films fail, that is under their mechanism.
Okay.
Okay. What in their
Yeah.
mechanism they make it, right? They're
Yeah.
not trying to make masa anyway. They're
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
trying to make new.
Hmm.
Uh, so, but then there is something what you call quote unquote art cinema.
Hmm.
Okay. First of all, I disagree with the name. You can at the most call it alternative cinema.
Hmm.
But yeah, because art is basically saying you're saying that the other people are not really artistic or something like that. I really don't think that's a matter.
Okay.
Okay, I think you can talk about certain things that work for you and didn't work for you in a
Hmm.
mainstream movie.
Hmm.
But I mean, of course, if it's a project, then of course, I mean,
Hmm.
then project also in alternative cinema, art cinema also projects happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So there's nothing about that. But I feel that there have been mainstream movies like Sholay is a mainstream movie, and
Hmm.
I don't think that film was. I mean, if anybody goes into it, how it was declared a flop in the first week when after it was released.
Yeah.
How many people were telling, GPCP, I think that why are you making this film? You're going to Ramgarh and shooting, and what
Hmm.
is this? And your heroes are wearing jeans. I mean, in 1975, what the fuck is wrong?
Hmm.
And so now people consider Sholay to be a very mainstream movie.
Yeah.
But Sholay was an absolutely experimental movie in the mainstream structure, by the way, at that time.
Okay. Hmm.
If you kind of analyze it, or
Hmm.
even Diwar for that matter, even
Hmm.
Zanjeer for that matter, I
Hmm.
would even say Dilwale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge was pretty experimental.
Hmm.
Okay, in the second half, or just see how the hero is introduced and see the kind of movies that were there before that,
Hmm.
which introduced
Okay.
the hero. And how was it introduced?
Okay.
Okay, so so alternative and the mainstream cinema, but they have a different sort of aesthetics.
Yeah.
Okay, now so that is fine. That is
Hmm.
absolutely there. Nobody can argue with that. Um, the the reason why I mean, I'm coming to a question why I find it difficult. Also because there is an I don't know where to start. Uh, so I call it basically that. So na, in mainstream there is a herd mentality.
Yeah.
एक ने कुछ बनाया वो चल गया तो
सब
सब लोग वही करेंगे. Yeah, I think one needs to also take a look at the herd mentality in alternate cinema. Okay. All right. Uh, and let's call it independent cinema. Okay. Because that's the word people use. So in my opinion, independence has got to do with the mind of the filmmaker and not really with the budget. Okay, in my opinion. Because you can be making a very, very cliched independent movie. Okay, that has like movies like that have been made. The kind of cliches and tropes have been there in such indie movies that are traveled around the fest and been talked about. And just because you're making it on a small scale doesn't make it into an independent film, because your mind has to be independent in the first place. All right. So that is one problem. I don't see much of trying to forget the breaking the rules, even bending the rules of what an independent film is supposed to be like in terms of the content or narrative. I don't see much audacity, honestly. All right, that is there. And there is another also problem that for some fucking reason, everybody seems to be obsessed with the quote unquote realistic movies in independent movies. I fucking just don't get that. I don't get that. Because if you actually try to look at the independent movies that have been made world over, right, since like 1940s, mid 1940s, okay, because of the Second World War, the cameras became cheaper, right? They became lightweight, and that's how neorealism and everything started. And after that, I mean, the amount of genres and the subgenres that they have tried, they're still doing it. Okay, along with the, of course, the kind of even right from ethnographic movies to the actually realistic movies and stuff like that, we just seem to have stuck largely with only one sort of a texture of the content, and it's just, so what happens is that producers in the independent film circuit, like for my kind of budget, okay, still like 1/3 of how a regular independent movie is made. Whatever, I mean, it has happened so many times that they don't really want to even think. I mean, they think ki, matlab independent bana rahe, to there has to be this somebody who has to be like, suffering and all those kind of things that have been happening in the cinema, and I'm like, give me a break. But because I don't want to do the same thing that I've done before. Okay. Second thing, I've grown up watching independent movies, all right, of very, very different kinds. So I'm like, this is, but that's the probably one of the few reasons. I still need to unearth a lot of other reasons. There is also, a kind of a subtle pressure, like the mainstream filmmakers have got this pressure of making money, being really upheld in the eyes of the distributors and investors and the marketing people and news media and everything. People who do independent movies also have got some kind of a pressure of, some kind of a burden, I feel sometimes, of somebody needs to tell them that, oh my god, this was really touching what you made, or stuff like that. I mean, or this festival or that festival, and so you see the irony of the word independent here. Okay, that's why I prefer to call it alternative cinema, because that I understand. Mainstream, what most of the people do, alternative, alag jaake. Independence has got more to do with this.
Okay, that's a great and a very unique approach to the very popular term nowadays, independent cinema. And now talking about the alternative cinema you are creating. We spoke about the finance. You said the films are sort of like micro budget films. For example, in Jaoon Kahan Bataya Dil, they're just like what 10 shots, like 10 just long shots in the film, and
Yeah.
so that's a creative call, right? And you don't want to compromise on the creative calls because of the lack of budget you have. And
No.
how
Yeah. No.
how do you approach your shooting process, because like there is lack of money, like lack of permissions maybe, and still get the content uh, to the level where the film is now on Netflix? You know what I mean, the technicalities as well and the content as well. Talk about the approach towards the style of the film being just long takes. And also
Yeah.
one major association is of course Richard Linklater's Before series. So both
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
things.
Of course.
What was your approach for both the things?